Do you know what Mozart, Billie Eilish, Kafka, and even Sweet Anita all have in common? Sure, they're all more or less famous, but that's not the answer we're looking for. Before I tell you what they share, tell me, Gustave, would you like to be like these remarkable people? Great! Well then, just like them, you're going to develop Tourette syndrome, a neurological disorder that's actually more common than you might think. So sorry, Gustave, but we're going to rewind your life a bit back to your childhood so we can watch the first symptoms start to appear little by little until the disorder reaches its most intense stages. Yep. Tourette's doesn't usually start showing up at Gustave's current age, he's already too old. But what's going to happen when our young test subject starts living with Tourette's? Will he start yelling insults at me like the stereotype suggests?
I'm a bitch! To fuck off!
What does the most severe form of this condition actually look like? And will Gustave be able to handle it? That's what we're about to find out. What's it really like to live with Tourette syndrome? Meet Gustave at age 7. Hello there, little guy, with an impressive amount of hair. The first signs of Tourette's usually appear between the ages of 6 and 7. After that, it's not the case for everyone, but it does seem that Gustave is in the average range as he's starting to exhibit unusual behavior. He's blinking more and more frequently and more forcefully. And the thing is, he's not doing it on purpose. He doesn't have control over it, it's kind of happening on its own. This kind of sudden, involuntary movement is what we call a motor tic. And these tics are the key signs of Tourette syndrome. Of course, having just one tic isn't enough for a diagnosis, you need to have several. So for now, Gustave doesn't actually have Tourette's. Blinking a little, clearing your throat, little things like that, they're super common. Around 1 in 200 people has at least one tic, so keep that in mind. Tourette's is when things go a step further. A few months have gone by and Gustave's symptoms are getting worse. He's now starting to make involuntary sounds. In this case, mini Gustave lets out a random little noise, like a dog bark, every 5 to 10 minutes. Well, I say every 5 to 10 minutes, but actually it depends on a few factors. When he's stressed or anxious, he tends to bark more, and when he's calm, he barks less. You might wonder if he has tics in his sleep, and the answer, thankfully, is no. But barking isn't his only tic, he's also shrugging his shoulders a lot. So now Gustave has 2 motor tics and 1 vocal tic. But sorry to disappoint you, he still doesn't officially have Tourette's, it's not quite enough. One important criteria is that the tics have to last more than a year. Sometimes they go away on their own after a few months, which is appreciated, but other times the tics multiply and stick around for quite a long time. That's when things start to get tough, and that's when we officially call it Tourette syndrome.
I might actually be having a tic attack.
And in case you were wondering where the fancy name comes from, Tourette was simply the name of the neurologist who first described the condition, plain and simple. A year has passed and Gustave's tics haven't gone away. In fact, they've gotten worse. He still blinks a lot, is shrugging his shoulders, and still does his vocal tic. And now he's picked up a new one. For people with Tourette's, it's completely normal for tics to evolve over time. There are old ones that stop and new ones that may show up. And interestingly enough, if several people with Tourette's spend a lot of time together, they can sometimes pick up on each other's tics. In any case, we can now say it for sure. Gustave officially has Tourette's, just like 1 in every 2,000 people. Yep, I told you it was more common than people think. And it actually affects boys more than girls. Around 4 out of 5 cases are male. We don't realize how common Tourette's is because it's not always as dramatic or obvious as people might think. Take Gustave, for example. At this point, he's not throwing himself on the floor screaming, at least not yet, but the condition has time to evolve. For his part, Gustave actually feels relieved to find out he has Tourette's. That might sound odd, but put yourself in his shoes. Up until now, he didn't understand what was happening to him. Even at school, he faced a lot of judgment from teachers and classmates. In some undiagnosed cases of Tourette's, people even start to wonder if they're going outright crazy. So there you have it. Now Gustave knows he's not crazy. And normally, his teachers will now be more understanding of his situation. They now know it's not his fault if he makes a bit more noise than the other students. You might be wondering where all this comes from though, and honestly, we're still not totally sure. There could be genetic causes, but the exact DNA sequences involved haven't been found yet. However, doctors in fact do know which parts of the brain are involved in Tourette's, but the detailed mechanisms of the condition are not fully understood. In pursuit of continuing to destroy cliches, people with Tourette's aren't any less intelligent than the average person. I'm pointing that out because, believe it or not, there really are people who believe this. But it's completely false. People with Tourette's, their IQ is right in the normal range. In Gustave's case though, don't be fooled. He was already kind of a dummy before he got Tourette's.
Hey!
Well, I'm not gonna get upset with him about that insult because he really can't help it. Besides, he's now around 10 years old, an age where symptoms tend to intensify. In fact, Tourette's is usually at its most severe at around the age of 11 or 12 years old. Gustave is entering the toughest stage to manage. Until now, his tics were relatively simple: blinking, shrugging, quick, short movements. Same with his vocal tic, it was just a quick bark and that was it. But now, starting to have complex tics, starting with swearing. Just to be clear, he's not doing it on purpose. It's called coprolalia, and it actually affects only around 10% of people with Tourette's. Some people with Tourette's don't swear, but instead compulsively repeat everything they're told. Speaking of complex tics, Gustave's motor tics are getting more complicated too. He's doing them in sequence now. Instead of just blinking, he'll now blink, then shrug, then blink again 3 times, over and over again. It's almost like a true convulsive choreography. I won't lie, Gustave is starting to be pretty much at his wit's end. Having constant tics is tiring enough, not to mention the constant fear of being judged every time he leaves the house. Kids his age aren't always the nicest. He's always being teased by his classmates, whether it's for his shrugging or his barking. Of course, the kids laughing aren't always trying to be mean. Sometimes even Gustave laughs at his own tics, especially when he does something that surprises him a little. Good thing he has a sense of humor about it. But we have to keep in mind, having all these tics is exhausting, really exhausting, especially since at age 10, school is full of important things to learn. Some kids with Tourette's even have trouble writing by hand because of their tics, and they sometimes need extra help. And there are situations that seem harmless at first, but can actually be dangerous for kids with Tourette's. For example, imagine riding a bike downhill at full speed, and suddenly your tics make you jerk the handlebars. Things can go very wrong. For adults, imagine having the same thing happen while driving a car. I think there'll be way more serious consequences. I might as well tell you that this syndrome is ruining Gustave's life. In a way, it's stealing his childhood. For people who've never had tics, Tourette's or otherwise, it's hard to imagine what it's like or even to explain it. For Gustave, it feels like an itch, a strong, urgent need to do his tic. And he feels relief when he finally gives in to the urge to bark or shout a curse word. And I should point out that he's not actually insulting anyone. The swear word isn't aimed at the person, it's just a tic. Right, Gustave? It wasn't really meant for me, right? In theory, it's possible to hold it in, at least for a while, but in practice, the frustration builds up fast and becomes unbearable. And the person with Tourette's ends up having no choice but to give in to the tic again. It's rare to get to this point, but in the most extreme cases of Tourette's, the person can become a danger to themselves and to others. Gustave is 11 years old now, and this is what's happening to him. He has violent tic attacks so intense that he sometimes throws his head back enough to hurt himself by banging or twisting his neck. There are some cases where people with Tourette's end up slapping themselves or even accidentally slapping others.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mom.
The teenager in this clip is called Bianca Sayas, and she has a very, very severe form of Tourette's, which also gives her big fits of rage. The best way to show you how intense her condition is to show you the state her house is in. Her house is rather destroyed, yes, and things don't go any better when Bianca tries to brush her teeth, for example. She breaks toothbrushes constantly and often ends up with toothpaste in her eyes. Poor Bianca, she gets into such extreme states that at times she almost looks possessed. Honestly, it makes me wonder how many people in the past were burnt at the stake just for Tourette's. Probably more than a few. And some old psychoanalytic theories even claim that Tourette's was a symbolic expression of masturbation, which doesn't really mean anything, but shows just how misunderstood and stigmatized this condition used to be, and sometimes, unfortunately, still is today. For both Gustave and Bianca, the only times they get a break from the tics is when they're really focused, when something truly captures their attention. For Bianca, it's ice skating that almost completely calms her symptoms. As for Gustave, he's found a passion that soothes him too, and that's knife throwing. Uh-oh, I think Gustave's calling for help. Ah, crap, he's hurt himself. He really is clumsy. Let's take him to the hospital right away. Now don't worry, Gustave is not dead, I assure you, but he has become so dangerous to himself that something drastic has to be done. In most cases, Tourette's symptoms tend to diminish during puberty and into adulthood, but sometimes the damage is so severe that we have to consider surgery. And the surgery in question is intense. It involves drilling 2 holes into the brain and inserting electrodes that deliver electrical impulses. The goal is to stimulate the areas in Gustave's brain that aren't functioning properly. The results aren't always immediate or miraculous, and above all, it's risky to have your brain tissue tampered with like that. This is in fact the operation Bianca Saez chose to undergo, and it had a major positive impact, significantly reducing her symptoms. Of course, she still has plenty of tics, but her life has become much calmer since she came out of surgery. And the same goes for our dear Gustave. Well, all's well that ends well, I guess. Gustave will always have Tourette's, but with any luck, it should become mild enough that most people won't even notice it, and he'll be able to live a pretty normal life.